Arcane is one of the best shows in modern animation, and there are a number of reasons why this could be. The film style, the plot, the animation are probably all factors, and I think that those are all huge aspects of this show's success. But I don't think it's what defines the show, because what I think defines the show is its characters. To make someone care about the story you're trying to tell, you first have to make them care about the characters that define the story. And Arcane does a wonderful job of making you care about these characters. But what truly makes these characters' dynamics stand out is how they use their differences, or more specifically their environmental differences, to contrast the characters with each other and ultimately help them grow as people. Arguably, the biggest contrast in the entire show is the parallel between Piltover and Zaun. Technically, it's the same city, but it's been divided into two by its citizens. There's the rich part, the top side, the real Piltover. The Piltover that its government wants you to see. Piltover is shown as this sort of paradise, and it's extremely clean and wealthy. It has a council to keep things fair. It's almost like a utopia. But what we know is that every utopia has a dystopia to it, and Piltover's is Zaun. Zaun and Piltover are parallel to each other. Zaun is hidden away from the rest of the world to see. It's the Undercity being under Piltover. It's this city that's full of crime and poverty, and it shows. Zaun citizens live in cramped spaces filled with toxicity. Smog fills the air they breathe, and even the food they eat is toxic. And all of this, all the reasons Piltover and Zaun are so different, is because of the economic inequality and divide between these two cities. And ultimately, they're forced to be this way because Piltover has the money and the political power that Zaun just doesn't. So how do these writers use the monumental differences between Piltover and Zaun and their economic inequality to improve these characters? And the answer is that they bring two characters together, one from Piltover and one from Zaun, and they show their motivations, their lifestyles, and their mindsets. Then they show how the two characters make an impact on each other, and how they change due to knowing and being in each other's presence. The most prominent example of this, by far, is the contrast between Vi and Caitlyn.
You're stronger than you think. And one day, this city's gonna respect us.
Vi is this girl who's been raised in the Undercity and knows the truth about how miserable it is down there. She knows the horror inflicted by the enforcers and knows that if she wants to survive, she has to know how to fight. She knows what it's like. She was raised by Vander because enforcers killed her parents. But she's also been given the task of protecting her adoptive family, Milo, Clagger, Echo, and Powder, and more specifically, taking care of and raising Powder. Those even being Vander's last words to her.
Take care of Powder.
Not to mention, there was no justice given to her parents. So she knows to get what she wants, she has to work for it. It's not fair. She knows that. And she's willing to risk her own life to protect the lives of the people around her. She feels responsible for the people she loves and how they get to live. But being constantly given the scraps of Piltover and not being able to fix the obvious unfairness, it leaves her with a lot of residual anger, which causes her to make rash and hasty decisions when she's confronted with an immediate problem, which, as you can probably imagine, leaves her with a lot more problems.
My dad says you're a misfit, and that we can't be friends anymore.
So why are you out here?
I'm a misfit too, I suppose.
And then there's Caitlyn, the girl who has been given everything she could ever need to survive. She lives in a mansion. Her mother withholds the significant amount of political power that comes with being a council member. She's been raised under the idea that enforcers only do good and are only trying to help, that all the people from the Undercity are dangerous, and that their justice system is not at all corrupted. In fact, that's the way most of the young generation has been raised in Piltover, to be naive. She can take a desk job that's basically been handed to her and live a life of luxury. But she doesn't want that. She wants to work a job that can help people. So she takes on the job of being an enforcer, fully believing that enforcers help people. Except with her parents being overprotective and overbearing, she ends up with a job among the enforcers that require a little more than standing there with a uniform on. So what happens when these two people who are being raised under completely different conditions, come together under a common goal?
Who the hell are you?
When they first meet, Caitlyn hardly trusts Vi. She even asks,
In what mad world would I trust someone like you?
and Vi, knowing exactly why she's in prison, responds with,
Someone like me? You enforcers are all the same, just asshole criminals in fancy uniforms.
and it's brief. But this interaction shows so much about how these two contrast with each other and exactly where the start of their journey together is. Caitlyn still is naive and unknowing girl who hasn't yet been exposed to the horrors of the enforcers, and Vi is still so defensive and untrusting. But that's not to say it's their fault they're like this, because it's the opposite. It's because of what happened to them and the environments they were raised in and what this has taught them. Caitlyn truly believes that Vi is dangerous and belongs in that prison because that's what she's been taught to believe. Vi rightfully can't trust anyone anymore after being wrongfully stuffed into prison and not knowing when, if ever, she'd get out.
What is this place? It's where the kind of people you topsiders don't want to think about wind up.
After spending a couple of days together, they start to trust each other a little bit more. Vi has shown Caitlyn the real world, a world she's always wanted to see and to help, but never got to until she met Vi. And in a turn, she saved Vi's life after she almost dies to Savika. We can see them become closer and willing to sacrifice more to each other, especially in the scene where Caitlyn gives up her gun, the only real form of protection she has, for medicine to save Vi's life. She is quite literally putting Vi's life in front of her own, a trait that has been seen many times at Vi. And now Caitlyn is starting to develop a relationship and a bond with Vi. When Caitlyn gives her the medicine and Vi starts panicking, Caitlyn holds her face and calms her down. And they almost kiss until Caitlyn turns away, leaving Vi a little disappointed. And then she changes the subject, clearly trying to avoid what has just happened. This is the first real vulnerable moment the two share. In this sort of situation, with the vulnerability of it, you'd expect that Vi would be the one turning away, except it's Caitlyn. Caitlyn is clearly unsure of Vi still, and she doesn't fully understand what sort of conditions Vi has had to grow up under, because soon after, Caitlyn asks Vi how she could not know if her sister is alive or dead, and then she asks Vi,
What, you don't have parents?
with Vi responding,
No. They were killed by enforcers.
This is the first real glimpse Caitlyn has of the personal effects the enforcers have inflicted on the citizens of Zaun. She has seen the effects of Shimmer, but in her mind, that's exactly what a bunch of criminals should do: illegally produce, sell, and use drugs. She doesn't understand the full story because she's only been taught half of it. The full story where drugs is part of the economy and people like Silco, a crime lord, uses it to control Zaun. And how the counselors are so consumed with the idea of their own political power that they fail to help the people that desperately need it. Caitlyn knows only what the topside has taught her, only half of the story, and essentially Vi is giving her the other half. And through this interaction, Vi opens up more of Caitlyn's world and introduces her to the world that she's had to live in her whole life. For Vi, it gives her something she hasn't really felt in years: affection. Being stuffed in prison for so long, she's missing physical touch and affection. And Caitlyn is the first one to give it to her after that. She shows why she's allowed to be vulnerable and to be open and emotional. And with a topsider and enforcer, she starts to know that some topsiders do have good intentions, but that their knowledge of the world has stopped them from truly helping the people they actually want to help.
I'm not the one who walked us into not one, but two of Silco's traps.
This isn't Silco. It's someone else.
How do you know?
Because we'd already be dead.
Oh, very nice.
In the 7th episode, we can see exactly where Vi and Caitlyn sort of become a team, and where they outright show that they care for each other. The episode starts off when the Firelight leader comes to take Vi, leaving Caitlyn pretty scared for her. Fast forward some scenes, and one of the Firelights, this time a little boy, comes to where Caitlyn is being held and offers her some water. At first shocked by the gesture, Caitlyn just looks at the boy, but after a moment, she pushes the water to the side and sees Echo. She asks him where Vi is, and when she doesn't receive an answer, she begs him to take her instead. And that's her that they want. Of course, Vi, being in no harm, comes out and starts flirting with Caitlyn.
My hero.
Caitlyn responds with,
I thought they were hurting you.
and at first glance, this interaction may really not seem like much, but however, it shows the immense amount of development in Caitlyn. Caitlyn, who started off thinking that Vi was just another low-life criminal from the Undercity that deserved what she got, being willing to give herself up even if it meant that she was going to be tortured. The other scene in this episode that I think shows their contrast is the scene where Caitlyn and Echo are arguing about the topside's intentions. Echo saying that
your people hunt us like animals, Silco pays them to do it.
Clearly showing that he, like all of the Undercity kids, know how corrupt the enforcers are. But Caitlyn, not sure about trusting Echo, doesn't believe him, saying that
That's not possible. You're wrong.
clearly Caitlyn is not fully convinced about what Echo says about the top side. But again, it's rightfully so, being raised the way she was. But what reason would he have to lie? She explains to Echo what the gemstone is, and he says that they could beat Silco with it. And she responds with,
That won't solve things.
and Echo interjects, saying,
Easy for you to say. Your people aren't dying all around you.
and ultimately what he says is right. Caitlyn is only able to act calmly because she hasn't had to suffer through what Echo and Vi have had to go through. And if it was Vi instead of Echo, I'm sure she would have acted in a similar way, rash and immediate. But Caitlyn, never having the pressure of the people she loves dying, if she doesn't act quick enough, is able to recognize that while it may solve the problem at hand, it won't solve the root of the problem, and that
This cycle of violence will never stop.
how any of the characters act in the situation, whether it be Echo and his immediate action that would solve the immediate problem but not the bigger one, or Caitlyn with her longer solution that might solve the whole problem, but the process would take more and more people dying, are both results of the conditions in which they grew up in. So I'm very aware of the violinship between these two, and I know I didn't really cover it in this video, but as the video is about how they contrast to each other and how they develop as singular characters due to it, there really wasn't a need to cover it, as well as the fact that the script is already 7 pages long and I don't have the energy to make it any longer. But I will just say this, I think this is a great way to start a romantic relationship between two characters in a natural way that doesn't seem forced. It allows for romantic chemistry without that becoming the main focus of the story, which I think was the perfect way of approaching it. But they're not together yet, and I think that had they gotten together in the first season, it would have thrown the show off, with Vi being as broken as she is, having to learn that Powder died again, as well as the fact that these two are still just getting to trust each other. Not to mention that they have the overarching problem that is Silco and Jinx, so they should probably focus on that before getting anywhere with each other romantically. But it's very clear that they still have an emotional and physical attraction to each other. And I think the first season set up the building blocks for a naturally developing relationship between two extremely well-written characters. And I hope that the second season is able to build on it just as well as the first season was able to start it. Arcane was such a standout in modern Western animation, and its second season has so much potential with what the first season was able to set up. Because really, the first season drew the blueprint so the second season could start the building. The entire team who worked on Arcane did such an amazing job with it. And if you didn't really already get this, I freaking love Arcane.